Hey guys, it's Sam and this is my August wrap-up. So I don't know about you guys, but August flew by for me, but at the same time it didn't. The books that I read at the beginning of the month, I felt like I read 2 months ago, so when I put my list together I was really surprised. I had a really great reading month. I read 12 books this month, and the majority of them I can honestly describe as fun. There's a few exceptions to that because the subject material is just not fun in those, but for the most part I had a really great time reading all the books that I read this month, so let's get going. The first book that I read was The Forsaken by Lisa M. Stasse. This book I wasn't really expecting a ton from, but I honestly really enjoyed it. I could not put this book down, and I don't even really know what it was. I don't know if I just was really feeling dystopia at this particular point or what it was, but basically the story is about a girl who lives in a dystopian society where when you are 16 years old you have to take a test, and this test is supposed to determine if you have the ability to be a criminal, or like the criminal mind, and if you do have that ability to be a criminal as per their test, they send you away to this island, and basically the life expectancy on this island is like 18 years old. There are different tribes kind of killing each other, they are scared of this island, you know, it's like the big bad thing that no one talks about. So of course this girl, when she turns 16, gets sent to this island and things kind of unravel from there. I would really kind of describe it as a Maze Runner type story. I didn't like the Maze Runner. From those of you that have been around a little while, you know I didn't like the Maze Runner, but this is very similar. There's a group of teenagers kind of cast away, no one really knows why, there's a lot of unanswered questions and everything else. This was very, very quick paced, and there was a lot of really unexpected twists. I did give this only about a 3.5 because I don't think that the plot was spectacular. I think there were a lot of holes, a lot of things were almost resolved too quickly, which in this kind of setting it's like, you know, you can drag it out a little bit, so I felt like that was a little bit like too easy for the characters, and also there is a romance in this that is horrible. Like the worst kind of insta-love slash I don't even know what it was that I've ever seen. It was just, you could have taken the romance out of the story and nothing would have changed. Like they could have made it a best friendship and nothing would change. So like the romance is horrible, but if you can get around that, it is a really fun read, really quick. Like I said, I read this in a day. It's a fun time. So especially if you like the Maze Runner, I would definitely give this a shot. The second book that I read this month was The Thief by Megan Whalen Turner. This is the first book in a series. I'm not sure how many books are in it, and it is an older series, so these are really easy to find very cheaply. I really enjoyed this book as well. This was a really great foundation setter for the series, so I'm really looking forward to the rest of the series. There is a lot of kind of Greek myth undertones to this, and the world that it's set in is not our world, it's like a fantasy world, but the elements of it are very, they feel very Greek and Roman mythology. There's a lot of that in it. So that's a lot of fun, because I love that. And the protagonist in this, the thief, is an awesome character. He feels like Flynn Rider from Tangled, for those that have seen that movie. He's very snarky and very like sassy, and he's just like a really conniving thief character, and he's a lot of fun. This book follows a main character who is a thief, and he has been thrown in a prison in one of the 3 kingdoms that are in this world, and he is kind of hired by the king to go and steal an artifact that will allow the king to rule another one of the kingdoms just by default. So that's all I'm going to tell you, because there's a lot of little twists and stuff that are a lot of fun with this. So I really enjoyed this story. I gave it a 3.5. It was a lot of fun. It was very quick. It's a very short book. And I'm really looking forward to the rest of the series because I hear that it really only goes up from here, and that if people didn't really enjoy this one, which I did enjoy it, but if people don't enjoy the first one, that it really kind of picks up after that, because there's a lot of world building and like character introductions and stuff like that in this book. So I'm really looking forward to the rest of the series, but I really enjoyed this as well. The third book that I read this month was The Penelopiad by Margret Atwood. This is a retelling of the Odyssey from Penelope's perspective, who is Odysseus' wife. I read this because of Bookish Thoughts, who is Jean. She was doing a classical read-along this month, and I decided to pick this up because this was the alternative to reading the Odyssey, and I really didn't feel like reading the Odyssey this month. I read it in high school, I didn't really feel like picking it back up, but it was nice to have the foundation of the Odyssey when reading this, although you don't need it. So this was a really nice retelling. It had Penelope's perspective, which I really appreciated, and it was written in our kind of language instead of like an ancient literature type language, which was really nice because it was really quick. Also, the way it's written and the pages, like, it's super short, so you can definitely get through this in a day. I really enjoyed seeing her perspective. I just really didn't identify with Penelope as a character. She was very like flighty, and she kind of went between being like a strong female character and not, and I know that was probably kind of the point, but it was just very weird. Also in this, she is supposed to be the cousin of Helen of Troy. I don't know if that's an actual reality and was kind of set in the Odyssey, but she's supposed to be Helen's cousin, and there's a lot of this like weird underlying jealousy with that. And I'm not a big fan of like girls hating girls, and I know it's probably realistic for the time, but I just really didn't like that about her character, and it came up a lot. So I enjoyed this, and I would definitely read it if you want like an Odyssey retelling, but I only gave it a 3 stars because I really just couldn't identify with Penelope as a character. The next book I picked up was Under the Never Sky by Veronica Rossi. This is the first book in the trilogy, and I really enjoyed this. This was a fun read. This is a dystopian series, sort of. I really hesitate to even call it dystopian. It kind of falls between dystopian, sci-fi, and fantasy, which are like 3 of my favorite things, so I was all about this series. This series takes place in a world where everyone lives underground because the world is ravaged by like really horrible lightning storms, and it's very unlivable, and the outside world is very scary, so people live in this underground world. So the main girl in the story ends up obviously outside of this world, and she ends up out in the crazy storm-infested world and finds out that people live out there as well. And that is very much a fantasy world. Some people have really heightened senses that almost seem like magical, and it's really cool, the kind of juxtaposition between the 2 worlds. So all our main character wants to do is go and find her mother, who is a scientist who is in one of the other like pods, for lack of a better term, another kind of like underground city. This story is told from 2 perspectives. It's told from our main girl protagonist, and then there is a boy protagonist, and he's one of the people that lives on the outside, and he has one of these heightened senses, and both of the perspectives are really cool. I couldn't pick one that I liked over the other. I liked both of them, so it was nice because sometimes with dual perspectives you can really kind of, they can blend together, or you could really hate one and love the other, and I just really loved both our characters. So this was a very fun read. The romance in this also is one of my favorites recently. It is definitely a romance that they kind of hate each other and is very antagonistic, and it just kind of gives you butterflies, and they are super cute. So I'm really looking forward to the rest of the series. This is definitely like a very quick read, very fast paced, and for fans of sci-fi, dystopia, and fantasy. The next book that I finished this month is Atonement by Ian McEwan. If you watched my last month's wrap up, I was in the middle of that last month, and I was not enjoying it. And I still have conflicted emotions about this book, even now, and I read at the beginning of the month. I really hated the first part of the novel. I really enjoyed the second part, and I kind of loved and hated the third part, and in the end I kind of feel like I loved it. I actually did a full review on this, so if you want to watch that, then click here. I'm going to be posting it soon, so if it's not here, then I haven't posted it yet. But if you're watching it in the future, hi future, and it will be posted here, so go ahead and click there and you can get my full thoughts on it, even though they're still a little jumbled because, like I said, I don't feel like I can give this a star review. I'm not really sure how I feel about it yet. I probably will never know how I feel about it, but I'm leaning towards liking it, which is really surprising considering how I felt last month. The next 4 books I read for the Bout of Books readathon that took place this month. The first book I read during the readathon was Scarlet, which is the second book in the Lunar Chronicles series by Marissa Meyer. I loved this book. I actually think I might have even loved it more than Cinder, and I really love Cinder. I loved the new characters that were introduced, I loved all of the twists, and I loved just everything about it. I actually did a non-spoiler review for anyone that wants to watch. I will also be clicking this here, but like I said last time, if it's not up there yet, it's because I haven't posted it yet, but if you're watching in the future, you can definitely click here and check it out. I loved every second of it. I'm really looking forward to the next book, and I feel like every book in the series is constantly getting better and better, and I really love this series, and especially with it being a fairy tale retelling and just everything I love in life. Yes, I cannot go wrong with this series. If you haven't picked this series up yet, what are you doing? These are excellent. The next 2 books I read are part of a duology, and they are The Assassin's Curse and The Pirate's Wish. Also, 5 out of 5 stars. I loved this duology. This duology really feels like it was one book, and I found out that it was actually one book that was split into 2, so it's definitely really best to marathon through these. I loved them. I loved the characters in this. I really loved the whole ensemble of characters in this. There are magical creatures and everything else that they come in contact with, and I just really loved every character that was introduced, and it was very different for a fantasy. It was also set in a Saudi Arabia type environment, which is great because usually fantasies almost feel like they're in medieval Europe a lot of times, and this was not. For those of you that don't know, this is a series about a girl who is a pirate, and she's being married off to another pirate clan, and she doesn't want to do that. She's very independent, so she runs away, and the clan that she was supposed to marry sends an assassin after her. Well, she tries to defend herself, ends up doing something that ends up having them bound together in a curse, so now they have to travel and go on a kind of like adventure journey to cure this curse of his. So this is wonderful. It's nonstop action. It is a great fantasy setting. All of the kind of mythos introduced are awesome and just fit in so seamlessly. I loved every second of it. You can really get a lot of imagery from this. I loved the writing, and I will be checking out other books from Cassandra Rose Clarke in the future because I really enjoyed this. I'm also going to be doing a review on this, so as I said with the other books, it'll be here. If it's not here, blah 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 blah. But check that out when I do post that because I will probably be gushing about this. I probably will be doing a spoiler-free and spoiler-full review because I have a lot to say about these and I really, really loved them. The last book I read for Bout of Books was the graphic novel Saga Volume 3. I've already talked about the other volumes before. I loved this. 5 out of 5 again, and I really enjoyed that this kind of left off in a place that was kind of nice because the rest of them aren't out right now. So I left off in a way that I'm not in a huge hurry. It wasn't like a huge cliffhanger in my head. So the ending was nice because I felt like, okay, I can breathe until the next one comes out. It's not like a dire emergency. I really enjoyed this, if you couldn't tell. Still 5 out of 5 like the rest of the series. I can't wait for the rest of them to come out. The next book that I picked up was Ask the Passengers by A.S. King. I have heard a lot of things about A.S. King. I've never read anything written by her. She writes a lot of contemporary with magical realism in it, so I was really looking forward to this book, and I was kind of let down by it. I actually tried to post a review about this and couldn't really get my words out, basically because I kind of felt like meh about this. Like, I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it. I gave it about a 3 out of 5 stars. It was just okay in my opinion. So this is a contemporary story about a girl named Astrid, and she is kind of trying to figure out who she is. You know, she's like 17, she's trying to figure out her place in the world, and also she is questioning her sexuality. So it kind of is following that and all the different issues that are coming up. She lives in a small town, so it's obviously something that is kind of frowned upon, and there's a lot of gossip. So she's just kind of trying to find her way in this whole entire book. And I did enjoy a lot of the things that this book brought up. Astrid very much doesn't want to be put in a category. She doesn't want to be labeled when she's not even really sure herself as far as her sexuality. So I really, really appreciated that. But I really didn't like the high school setting. I know I read a lot of books that are YA novels, but I didn't really like the constant, you know, high school mean girl gossip kind of trend that was happening. Also, I really didn't like the characters. I couldn't identify with Astrid. I couldn't identify with really anybody in the story, so I really didn't like anybody enough to really feel very, very like passionate and emotional about their story. I really did enjoy the magical realism elements of this story though. I really enjoyed how she talks to passengers in an airplane and just like imaginary, you know, in her head, hypothetical, and that is kind of how she sorts through these different questions she has. She also talks to philosophers that she's learning about in her school, and I really enjoy that. So she kind of sees them and they kind of give her answers and stuff like that. Also, the passengers that she talks to, you kind of get snippets of their story that they kind of pass down just to the reader, and that's really cool, and I really like the magical realism element. So I'm looking forward to reading more from A.S. King and seeing if I enjoy that, because the magical realism that she kind of specializes in I really enjoyed. But I would never really reread this book. If you are a fan of Speak, it felt very similar to Speak to me with the high school setting and the tackling like rough issues. So if you really enjoyed that book, I think you would enjoy this. But like I said, I just kind of felt meh about it. The next book that I picked up was Of Poseidon by Anna Banks, and I am already smiling like an idiot about this. I really, really loved this book. It was a ton of fun. This is the first book in a trilogy, and it is a mermaid series. So I'm going to say something that's going to sound a little extreme to some people, but bear with me to the end. So when I was reading this book, I got this very big nostalgia feeling, and I realized that it kind of felt to me the same way that I felt about Twilight. Hold in with me for a second. When I first read Twilight, and I think when a lot of us first read Twilight when it first came out and people really enjoyed it, you got this like overwhelming like excitement. You were loving everything you were hearing about. You were hearing kind of about this new lore, and you just loved the romance, and you loved the characters, you loved the ensemble characters and all the friends that pop up and everything else. That is exactly how I felt about this. I loved the mermaid lore that was introduced in this. It was awesome and a lot of fun to learn about. I loved all of the characters. They were fun and sassy and snarky, and just all of them were a great time. I really, really loved all of them, and I really identify with all of them. This is a dual perspective book, and I really loved both perspectives, and I just loved the love story. It is so cute and just one of those like, oh, so just yes, and I just really loved everything about that. So that's why I felt like it was kind of like Twilight. Like, I just got that really great nostalgia feeling. I really, really loved this, and I'm really looking forward to the rest of the series. I've already ordered the second book. I might even order the third book just so I can marathon through them. They are a ton of fun. If you feel like maybe you could kind of read that, just read it. It is a lot of fun, I promise. I'm sure at the end of the series I'll be doing a huge review on it because I really, really love this. This series doesn't get enough credit. It is a ton of fun, a great end of the summer read. I really, really recommend you pick it up if you haven't yet. The last book that I read this month was Love in the Time of Global Warming by Francesca Leah Block. This is a very, very small book, and it is definitely a book that you can read in one sitting. It is a story about a girl who is part of a natural disaster that basically destroys the whole world as we know it, and there are some people still left alive, so it is definitely like not dystopian, because dystopian implies that there's still like a government set up and things are kind of evil and whatever. No, there was no government. It is apocalyptic, like it is craziness, but basically it is a retelling of the Odyssey, which I really enjoyed. So basically she is on the hunt for her family, so she goes through all these trials and meets these people, and the Odyssey is kind of her guide. So if you've read the Odyssey, you'll really be able to follow kind of what is happening and how it's similar. If you haven't read the Odyssey, they also include quotes from the Odyssey, so you can kind of follow what they're talking about. But this is a really quick, fun, easy read. I really enjoyed it. Also, something that I didn't know when reading any of the covers or anything is there are a ton of LGBTQ characters in this, which I really appreciate because it's not a story about them being LGBTQ. It is definitely a story about survival, but a lot of the characters in it are, and I really, really enjoyed that because the author doesn't make a fuss about it. It's just a story about people who are trying to survive that happen to be LGBTQ. So this is very fun. I will say this, I couldn't really identify with a ton of the characters. It is a very quick read, so it doesn't get a lot of character development, and it definitely is following the story of the Odyssey, so you don't really get to kind of feel very emotional about them, or at least I didn't. I really didn't identify with them. There are things that happen to them that you could potentially feel very torn if you are very emotionally invested in them, and I just really wasn't. But I really, really enjoyed the concept. I definitely gave this a 3.5, and I look forward to reading the rest of the series. The Odyssey portion wraps up at the end of this book, and that's not a spoiler, like it's not like the series wrapped up or anything like that. There's more to it. But the next book is actually a retelling of Virgil's Aeneid, I think is how you pronounce it, which I've never read before, but I'm interested to see how that kind of goes and if I can pick up on that the way I picked up with this, because I've never read the Aeneid and I have read the Odyssey, so I'm going to see if it's as easy as it was for me to follow this. But these are a lot of fun. They are definitely like read it in a day, and I really, really love the imagery. The author is a beautiful, beautiful storyteller, and you just get some awesome imagery in it. So if you want like a fun read, a fun retelling, you like the Odyssey, any of that, I would really recommend this. Alright guys, that is it for my August wrap-up. I will post all the reviews that I mentioned down below, any of them that I do now and in the future. If you want to check those out, please comment down below and let me know what you read this month and what book you think was your most fun book. Like I said, I have a ton to choose from. Thank you all for watching, guys, and I will see all of you guys very soon. Bye!